Hello and welcome back Deathguard players. Today on Planet 40k we're going to be reviewing our second unit from the new codex. So this is episode 2. So we're going to be discussing the new HQ unit, the Lord of Virulence. So if you have missed episode 1, there is a link at the top corner now for you to go check that out where we reviewed the Plague Burst Crawler. As for today's unit review, the Lord of Virulence, he comes in at 6 power or 120 points and he's got the following keywords of note. So he's got the new Plague Company keyword, he's a Bubonic Astartes, he's a Terminator, an Infantry, and of course a Lord of the Deathguard. So the Plague Companies are the new mini-factions within the Deathguard army that unlock Warlord Traits, stratagems and a new relic. Being an infantry of course will add to things such as being in cover, and the Lord of the Deathguard actually interacts with a new rule within the book called Infernal Jealousy, which is on page 40 of your codex. It states that you're only allowed one Lord of the Deathguard unit per detachment. So you will need to pay more command points for detachments if you were to select another Lord of the Deathguard, so units such as the Demon Prince for example. Onto his stat line next then, he's got movement 5-inch, weapon skill 2+, ballistic skill 2+, strength 4, toughness 5, wound 6, attacks 5, leadership 9 and a 2+ save. So that Terminator armor is of course slowing him down to a 5-inch movement, but it's granting a better armor save of a 2+. And of course, as with most Deathguard units, he's going to have a toughness 5, which really helps. Onto abilities, he's got Disgustingly Resilient, which is a -1 to all damage taken from each attack. He's then got Contagions of Nurgle, which is a stink that all the Deathguard units put out, which gets worse as the game progresses. Now in Battle Round 1, it's got a 1-inch radius for each of your units, and it can go right up to a 9-inch radius from turn 4 onwards. It effectively inflicts a -1 to your opponent's toughnesses while they're within that range. So this is going to really aid weapons with their wound rolls. Next he's got Teleport Strike, which is the ability to deep strike into the battle from turn 2 onwards, as long as you're more than 9 inches away from enemy models. Next is Diseased Terminator Armor, which is effectively a 4+ invuln save, which is slightly better than a 5+ invuln save that standard Terminators have. He's then got Lord of the Deathguard, which is an aura. While friendly Plague Marine core units within 6 inches of the model, each time a model makes an attack, you reroll ones. So it's virtually the equivalent of a Space Marine Captain's Rites of Battle aura. Then his final ability is Master of Destruction, which is another aura, and you're giving it to Plague Company core units within 6 again. Each time they make a ranged attack with a plague weapon on an unmodified wound roll of a 6, you will improve the armor penetration characteristic of the attack by 1. So pretty decent. Now that's the abilities he has. Moving into the weapon loadout. So the Lord of Virulence is equipped with a twin plague spewer, a plague claw, and then of course blight grenades with crack grenades. So firstly, the Twin Plague Spewer. This has got a range of 12-inch, it's heavy 2d6, strength 5, -1 AP and 1 damage. Now it is a plague weapon, so you're going to be re-rolling wound rolls of a 1, and also this weapon will automatically hit. So the first thing to note here, that it's a heavy weapon which would normally be a -1 to hit, unless they are a Bubonic unit which ignores that. However, this weapon auto hits anyway, so it's pretty sweet. It's also working in Overwatch 2, so Horde units beware, because 2d6 auto hits is not something you want to be facing. Strength 5 hurts all infantry units, and a -1 takes away a reliable save just about. Now the weapon is more effective against lighter targets with a 6+ armor save, but it's still helpful with removing a more elite model if you get a solid amount of hits. Also don't forget it's a plague weapon, so you reroll 1s to wound. And also if you're within contagion range, then factions such as Drukhari that have a toughness 3 will drop them to a toughness 2, and you're going to be wounding them on 2s. They've also got blight grenades as well as crack grenades, which neither will see much use. I'll put them on the screen for you guys just to see the stats of both. Onto his melee weapon, he's got a Plague Claw, which is a strength ×2, making it strength 8, -3 AP and the damage is 2. Again, it's a plague weapon, so you're rerolling 1s to wound, but you must subtract 1 from the attack's hit roll when using it. So it's hitting on 3s, which is quite standard for quite a lot of heavy melee weapons in the game. As for a quick breakdown of what to expect when using this, so the Lord of Virulence has 5 attacks base, which on average you're going to hit about 3.3 times with that. Against toughness 3, 4 and 5 you're going to be putting them down 1 toughness because of the contagion ability, so you're going to be wounding on 2s, rerolling 1s. So you should on average wound 3.2 of those, so you're barely missing. Against toughness 6, 7 and 8, again you're going to be putting them down a toughness, so you're going to be wounding on 3s, netting an average wound pool of 2.6 wounds. Then toughness 9 becomes toughness 8 with that contagion ability again, so wounding on 4s, and as a result it's approximately 1.9 wounds. All at -3 AP, which puts them on invuns or dead, then a 2 damage a pop. It's doing a bit of work. So against the current Space Marine meta, you should be killing 3 Primaris Marines per turn in combat. More elite units with 3 wounds for example will be a bit wasteful, as it's going to take 2 of your wound dice to clear a model such as a Terminator. Against a vehicle, it's about 5.2 damage on average, which is pretty solid, and this is of course after you've used your range attacks in shooting as well, so it won't have a bad damage output overall. The main target here is infantry with 2 wounds, as those models tend to be close to about 30 points a man, and if you're clearing 3 of those per turn, that's pretty good going. So next I want to touch upon some of the Warlord traits that work well with this model. Now I will be doing a Warlord trait video at some point in the near future, but just to select 1 or 2 from the 6 that I like the look of, you've got Revolting Resilient, which is basically the old Disgustingly Resilient rule, giving a 5+ feel no pain roll for your model, which I quite like, especially if you're using them as a beak stick unit. I also like the look of Arch Contaminator, which grants your plague weapon reroll to wound, so your plague spews are auto hitting and rerolling to wound, and your plague claw is also rerolling all the wounds too, so pretty good. To be honest though, all the traits are pretty solid, so you can't really go wrong. Now there's a new section in the codex called Deadly Pathogens, which allows you to upgrade a plague weapon to have an additional +1 strength along with an extra buff. There's 7 extra buff options to choose from. Again, I'll probably do a more in-depth breakdown of these in a later video. They cost between 10 and 20 points depending on your selection, and they're all on page 48. Another future video that we're going to be doing in more detail is the relics, but for now, for this review, I wanted to mention the Plague Skull of Glotilla, which is a once per battle relic that doesn't replace any weapons. You use it in the movement phase and you select an enemy unit within 6 inches of the bearer. You roll 7 dice, and any 4s or 5s will inflict a mortal wound, and any 6s will inflict D3 mortal wound, which is pretty awesome. I mean, this can be done to characters as well, anyone within range. Now with the law of averages, you should get at least 3 4+ rolls, and one of them should be a 6, so it's roughly going to score you about 4 mortal wounds, maybe 5. But that's solid. Like I mentioned, it doesn't replace its current weapons and it's a freebie, so not bad if you're trying to take out a character. Next I wanted to touch upon some stratagems within the new book, which work well with your model here. So the Eternal Hatred for 2 CP, add +1 to the wound rolls of either your shooting attacks or your melee attacks. Both options pretty viable. Diseased Effluence for 1 CP. Now this one's weird because you give yourself a mortal wound, but then on a 2+ roll you dish out 2 D3 mortal wounds to an enemy unit within engagement range. Unless it's a character, then it's just 1 D3. So at a small cost of losing a wound, you could potentially remove quite a few models or hurt a character back. Now this is done in your command phase. Now why that's useful is because if you know that your opponent is going to fight first in this turn and possibly kill your model, then you can sacrifice yourself slightly, doing it in your own turn and damaging your opponent's model, possibly taking him out with you. Befouled Incubators. So you use this stratagem in the fight phase. When the Deathguard character from your army is selected to fight, until the end of the phase, each time an enemy model is destroyed by an attack made by your model, you roll a d6, and on a 3+, that unit will suffer 1 mortal wound, to a maximum of 3 mortal wounds. So if you do kill 3 models, then on average you're going to get 2 3+ rolls. But the only problem with this is you have to select the stratagem before you even begin to fight, so there's no guarantee you'll kill any models. Release the Toxins is interesting as it interacts with characters that are carrying relics. It costs 2 CP, but enemy units within 7 inches of your relics will suffer a mortal wound on a roll of a 2, 3, 4 or a 5, and a 6 being D3 mortal wounds. Now if you pair this with the relic I mentioned earlier, that's a crazy amount of mortal wounds within the turn. Eruption of Filth for 1 CP used when your character dies in battle. Roll a d6 for any units within 3 inches of your dead model, and on a 2, 3, 4 or 5 they're going to suffer a mortal wound, and a 6 is D3 mortal wounds. So I'm sensing a bit of a common theme here with these mortal wounds. So command points are going to be a huge thing for a Deathguard player. Another one, Gifts of Decay is an extra relic option, and Plague Chosen is your extra Warlord trait option for your army. Then you've got Blight Bombardment, which can be used in the command phase. You select a point on the battlefield, then on your next command phase, roll a d6 for any units within 6 inches of the selected point. On a roll of a 2 to a 6, the unit will suffer d3 mortal wounds, and on a 7 or more, they suffer d6. Now I did say 7 or more, not 6, as there is a modifier involved here. If they are an infantry unit, then it'll be a +1 to the roll, and if it's a character unit, then you're going to -1 to the roll. Furthermore, if your Warlord is the Lord of Virulence, then this stratagem will only cost you 2 CP rather than 3 CP. Not bad. And you can be tactical with this and place it in a key location or close to a melee battle where your opponent has the option of falling back or taking the hit. Then finally, Overwhelming Generosity for 1 CP extends the range of your spewers to 18-inch range. Not bad at all. So tons of stratagems that work with this model. I mean, there's plenty more as well. I'm just not going to go through all of them. So before we conclude with the review, it's worth making a note of a good few units that work well with your Lord of Virulence. Now, if you are deep striking, then either the Blightlord Terminators or the Death Shroud Terminators will be a fitting unit to flank in with. Both units are pretty tough. The Blightlords have a good amount of range attack options, and the Death Shroud Terminators will prevent even snipers from taking shots at your character due to their bodyguard aura. If you are foot slogging, then there's nothing wrong with having Plague Marine units around him with 2 wounds a pop now. They're still pretty tough and they've got tons of options. The main common factor here is that all 3 of the units I've just mentioned have core, so they're going to massively benefit from the buffing abilities. So before we close the review, if you haven't already hit that subscribe button below, we're doing tons more Deathguard reviews in the near future. We'll most likely be covering every unit within the codex, along with some special videos that cover things like Warlord Traits, psychic abilities and whatnot. So subscribe not to miss out on any of those. So the Lord of Virulence, a pretty tanky HQ unit that can shoot, he can fight. His weapons lean towards being quite an aggressive character on the front line, as his spears are only 12-inch range. Even though he is slow at 5-inch, he does have the teleport strike, so he can get in on turn 2 no problem, but he will need to come in with some Terminator buddies, I think, which isn't a cheap method. His buffing abilities are pretty good, although the Master of Destruction aura isn't the best, as Plague Marines and Blightlord Terminators are mainly carrying non-plague range weapons. Only the Death Shroud Terminators come stocked with range plague weapons for the whole unit. Now there's a bit of competition within the book for this spot, such as the Lord of Contagion, which is more of a melee unit, or the Chaos Lord in Terminator armor, which can have a combi melter and a chain fist. He's 5 points cheaper if you equip those 2 weapons, but loses out on the Master of Destruction ability. The Chaos Lord also has access to anti-infantry weapons such as lightning claws, so there's not much difference here in price, maybe 5 or 10 points. Also, if you are foot slogging, then you could use the budget Chaos Lord without the Terminator armor for only 85 points plus weapons. The only other option is the Demon Prince, who's a bit pricey but has the stats for it, but he's the only other one that is a Lord of the Deathguard, which can only have 1 per detachment of course. So for today's review, the Lord of Virulence is going to get a Planet 40k rating of 4 out of 5. All the options mentioned are pretty good. There are only subtle changes between all the lords in particular, so it's more about how it fits into your game plan. Anyway, let me know your thoughts below. Question of the day for all you viewers: which Chaos Lord would you rather select? You've got the Lord of Virulence, the Lord of Contagion, or a Chaos Lord with Terminator armor? Put your answers below. Anyway guys, hit the like button on your way out. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.